In the sprawling metropolis of Los Angeles, California, a peculiar phenomenon began to unfold in early 2021. It wasn't a murder spree or a series of break-ins that captured the city's attention. It was something far more insidious and surreal. The first sign came when a local bookstore owner named Clara Bennett discovered a strange object on her doorstep one morning. A vintage rotary phone, its cord neatly coiled and its handset resting off the hook. Alongside it lay a handwritten note that read, "Pick up when it rings." Clara hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or call the police. She had no idea who would leave such an odd gift or threat on her stoop. After several minutes of deliberation, she decided to unplug the phone and stash it in a closet, dismissing it as some kind of prank. But later that evening, as she closed up shop, the phone rang anyway. The sound sent chills down her spine. How could it ring if it wasn't connected? Against her better judgment, she picked up the receiver. A distorted voice greeted her, mechanical yet eerily calm. "You've been chosen. Follow the instructions, and you'll understand why." Before Clara could respond, the line went dead. Over the next few weeks, similar incidents were reported across Los Angeles. People from all walks of life, teachers, bartenders, retirees, even children, found themselves in possession of these mysterious phones. Each device was unique. Some were sleek mid-century models, others clunky relics from the 1970s, but all shared the same eerie directive. When they rang, and they always did, the recipients heard cryptic messages tailored specifically to them. One man received a phone engraved with his initials and a message warning him about a coworker he'd recently suspected of stealing from the company. Another woman found hers tucked inside a shoebox at a thrift store. When she answered, the voice told her she'd forgotten her son's birthday 3 years in a row. These weren't random observations, they were intimate, invasive details plucked directly from their lives. Some messages offered advice, while others issued veiled threats. All left the recipients unnerved. Word of the phantom phones, as they came to be known, spread quickly through social media. Hashtags like #RotaryRiddles and #GhostCalls trended for days, with users sharing photos of their devices and speculating about their origins. Was this an elaborate marketing stunt, a psychological experiment, or something darker? Detectives assigned to investigate the case struggled to make sense of it. There was no clear pattern linking the victims beyond the fact that they lived in Los Angeles. No ransom demands accompanied the phones, nor did any calls result in direct harm. Yet the implications were chilling. Whoever was behind this knew things they shouldn't, things only someone close to the victims could know. Then came the incident that pushed the situation into truly alarming territory. A single mother named Sarah Monroe received her phone late one night, delivered anonymously to her apartment building's lobby. The accompanying note simply read, "Answer before midnight." Exhausted from a long day of work, Sarah ignored it until just minutes before the deadline. When she finally picked up, the voice on the other end said, "Your daughter is not safe." Sarah's blood ran cold. Her 8-year-old, Emily, was asleep in the next room. She rushed to check on her, finding her peacefully dreaming, untouched and unharmed. Still shaken, Sarah called the police, who arrived within minutes to secure the scene. Officers searched the apartment thoroughly, but found no signs of forced entry or surveillance equipment. The phone itself provided little forensic value. It appeared to operate independently of any network, making it impossible to trace. As news of Sarah's experience spread, panic rippled through the community. Parents kept their children indoors, schools tightened security measures, and businesses installed additional cameras. Flyers bearing images of the various phones circulated widely, plastered on lampposts and shared online. Yet despite the heightened awareness, the source of the phones remained elusive. They seemed to appear out of nowhere, often left in public spaces or slipped under doors without witnesses. Detectives working the case turned their focus inward, combing through databases for anyone with expertise in telecommunications or electronics. One promising lead emerged when a tech-savvy teenager claimed to have hacked into one of the phones, revealing fragments of code suggesting the devices were modified landlines repurposed to function autonomously. Further analysis showed traces of custom software designed to mimic human speech, a sophisticated blend of AI and pre-recorded audio. Meanwhile, investigators revisited reports of stalking, harassment, and identity theft, searching for patterns that might connect the incidents. What emerged was a chilling realization: the phones weren't targeting random individuals. Instead, they seemed to focus on people whose lives intersected in subtle ways, shared acquaintances, overlapping routines, or mutual secrets. It was as if the perpetrator had mapped out an intricate web of relationships, using the phones to expose cracks in the foundation. One particularly disturbing report involved a young couple, Jake and Mia Torres, who both received phones on the same day. Jake's message accused him of cheating on Mia, while Mia's warned her that Jake couldn't be trusted. Neither accusation was true, at least not yet, but the strain of the accusations drove a wedge between them. Their relationship unraveled publicly, with friends and family taking sides based on what they believed the phones had revealed. Amidst the chaos, a retired journalist named Margaret Hayes became an unlikely hero. While sorting through old files in her home office, she stumbled upon a photograph taken at a charity gala several years earlier. In the background, partially obscured by a crowd, stood a man holding a briefcase filled with what appeared to be disassembled phone parts. Margaret recognized him instantly, not because she knew him personally, but because he had attended multiple events around town over the years, always alone, always observing. She contacted authorities immediately, providing not only the photo but also detailed recollections of his behavior. The discovery sent investigators scrambling to reevaluate their approach. Enhanced imaging technology revealed subtle features in the photograph that matched descriptions provided by witnesses. Facial recognition software flagged potential matches in criminal databases, narrowing the list of suspects considerably. Meanwhile, Margaret's tip prompted others to come forward with similar stories, describing encounters with the same man at various locations throughout the region. One woman recalled seeing him loitering outside a daycare center, jotting notes in a small notebook. Another mentioned how he had once tried to strike up a conversation with her son during a Little League game, only to retreat when she intervened. With renewed momentum, police launched a coordinated effort to track him down. Roadblocks were set up, patrol units doubled, and drones deployed to monitor key areas. Public alerts urged citizens to report any suspicious activity, emphasizing the importance of swift action. The pressure mounted, squeezing the man into increasingly desperate maneuvers. He abandoned his usual haunts, venturing further afield in search of anonymity. But his methods betrayed him. The same meticulous planning that had kept him hidden now painted a clear picture of his intentions. Finally, after weeks of relentless pursuit, officers cornered him in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The building was dark, its windows boarded up, and its interior cluttered with debris. Inside, they found him hunched over a table, surrounded by tools, wires, and half-assembled phones. He offered no resistance, surrendering silently as if resigned to his fate. Handcuffed and led away, he maintained an eerie calm, his expression unreadable. Later, during interrogation, he spoke in clipped sentences, refusing to elaborate on his motives or acknowledge the harm he had caused. To him it seemed, the world was merely a stage, and he its reluctant director. Sarah's daughter Emily was found alive but traumatized, hidden in a makeshift shelter constructed deep within the warehouse. Rescuers described the scene as haunting: blankets strewn across the floor, empty food wrappers scattered around, and crude drawings pinned to the walls depicting scenes of captivity. Despite the ordeal, Emily clung to hope, whispering repeatedly, "I knew you'd find me." Her reunion with her family was bittersweet, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. In the aftermath, the city grappled with the fallout. Survivors sought counseling, struggling to rebuild lives fractured by fear. Communities rallied together, organizing self-defense workshops and advocating for improved safety measures. Local businesses invested in better lighting and surveillance systems, determined to prevent future tragedies. Yet for all the progress made, the scars ran deep, reminders of a darkness that had seeped into the fabric of everyday life. And as the man awaited trial, locked away in solitary confinement, the nation watched closely, torn between demands for justice and uneasy reflections on the forces that shape monsters and the systems that fail to stop them. The trial captivated the nation, drawing attention not only to the crimes themselves, but also to the broader societal issues they exposed. Prosecutors painted Hargrove as a calculating predator, driven by a twisted desire for control and dominance. Defense attorneys countered by highlighting his history of untreated mental illness, arguing that systemic neglect had allowed his condition to spiral out of control. Witnesses testified about their encounters with him, describing a man who exuded charm when necessary, but maintained an impenetrable emotional distance. One woman described him as a ghost, someone who could slip in and out of conversations without leaving a trace. Another recalled how he once offered to help organize a neighborhood watch program, only to abandon the effort midway without explanation. These anecdotes, scattered and incomplete, hinted at a mind capable of extraordinary manipulation. What truly set Hargrove apart, however, was his fixation on exposing vulnerabilities. Records showed he had meticulously studied human behavior, devouring books on psychology, sociology, and even urban planning. He viewed society as a machine, its gears turning predictably until disrupted by chaos. To him, orchestrating attacks in public spaces wasn't about destruction for its own sake. It was about exposing weaknesses, forcing people to confront the fragility of their routines. Grocery stores, parking lots, fast food restaurants, all were chosen not randomly, but because they represented microcosms of order ripe for dismantling. His ultimate goal, according to notes recovered from a storage unit rented under one of his aliases, was to create a living experiment where fear became the dominant currency. The discovery of Hargrove's manifesto sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Written in dense, fragmented prose, it detailed his philosophy with chilling clarity. People cling to patterns, he wrote, because patterns give them meaning. Break the pattern and you break them. The document outlined not just the grocery store attack, but a series of planned incidents, each escalating in complexity and scale. Maps, diagrams, and annotated photographs accompanied the text, revealing a level of preparation that bordered on obsession. Most alarming was a section titled Phase 2, which hinted at targeting larger venues, a stadium, a mall, perhaps even a transit hub. The implications were staggering, suggesting that the grocery store had been merely a trial run for something far more devastating. As authorities scrambled to locate Hargrove, the public response grew increasingly volatile. News outlets dissected every detail of his profile, amplifying fears with sensational headlines. Parents kept children indoors, businesses implemented stricter security measures, and social media erupted with calls for vigilante justice. Yet amidst the hysteria, a quieter narrative emerged, one of empathy and accountability. Mental health advocates argued that Hargrove's descent into violence stemmed from systemic failures, pointing to gaps in care and support for individuals like him. They urged caution, warning against reducing his actions to simple villainy. "This isn't just about one man," one advocate stated during a televised panel. "It's about a society that abandons its most vulnerable members, then acts surprised when they lash out." Despite these efforts, the prevailing mood remained one of dread. Rumors spread of sightings across the region, prompting panicked reports that overwhelmed emergency lines. Law enforcement doubled patrols in high-risk areas, deploying canine units and drones in a desperate bid to intercept Hargrove before he struck again. Meanwhile, Marcus, the unwitting accomplice, became a lightning rod for public outrage. Harassed online and ostracized by neighbors, he retreated into seclusion, haunted by guilt and fear. In interviews conducted under heavy protection, he expressed remorse but also bewilderment. "I thought I was helping someone," he said, his voice breaking. She reported seeing a man matching Hargrove's description frequenting her branch, poring over maps and architectural blueprints. Surveillance footage confirmed his presence, capturing him exiting the building with a backpack slung over one shoulder. Police converged on the area, setting up roadblocks and canvassing nearby neighborhoods. Hours later, they found him holed up in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, surrounded by stacks of research materials and crude sketches of potential targets. When officers breached the premises, Hargrove offered no resistance, surrendering silently as if resigned to his fate. His arrest brought a measure of relief, but the scars ran deeper than anyone anticipated. Survivors of the phantom phones struggled to reclaim their sense of safety, some refusing to answer calls from unknown numbers even months later. Communities grappled with questions of resilience and responsibility, debating how such an elaborate scheme had gone undetected for so long. And yet, as Hargrove awaited trial, locked away in solitary confinement, the nation watched closely, not just for justice, but for answers about what drove someone to orchestrate something so bizarre and invasive. During the trial, prosecutors painted Hargrove as a master manipulator who thrived on chaos. They presented evidence showing he had spent years studying his victims, gathering intimate details through social media profiles, public records, and even casual conversations overheard at coffee shops or parks. His obsession with human behavior bordered on pathological. Notes recovered from his hideout revealed meticulous observations about people's habits, fears, and secrets. To him, the phones weren't just tools, they were instruments of control, designed to dismantle lives piece by piece. Defense attorneys countered by arguing that Hargrove's actions stemmed from untreated mental illness. Experts testified that he exhibited signs of severe paranoia and delusions of grandeur, believing himself to be a moral arbiter tasked with exposing society's flaws. Yet, despite these arguments, the jury ultimately found him guilty on multiple counts of harassment, stalking, and psychological manipulation. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison without parole, calling his crimes an unprecedented invasion of privacy that left lasting wounds. But the story didn't end there. In the months following Hargrove's conviction, Los Angeles underwent a transformation unlike anything seen before. Residents banded together to form grassroots organizations aimed at combating digital surveillance and protecting personal data. Workshops on cybersecurity became commonplace, teaching people how to safeguard their online presence against prying eyes. Even local schools incorporated lessons on digital literacy, emphasizing the importance of privacy in an increasingly connected world. What truly set this case apart, however, was the ripple effect it had beyond California. Inspired by the events in Los Angeles, tech companies began developing new technologies to detect and prevent similar schemes. One startup created an app capable of identifying rogue devices operating outside traditional networks, a direct response to the phantom phones. Meanwhile, lawmakers introduced legislation targeting unauthorized use of personal information, sparking national debates about the balance between innovation and individual rights. For Sarah Monroe, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as possible. She remained vigilant, installing cameras around her home and enrolling Emily in self-defense classes. But she also channeled her fear into action, becoming an advocate for victims of cyberstalking and harassment. Her testimony before Congress helped push forward key provisions in the new privacy laws, earning her recognition as a voice for change. As for Margaret Hayes, the retired journalist whose tip cracked the case wide open, she found herself thrust back into the spotlight. Media outlets clamored for interviews, eager to hear more about her discovery. Rather than bask in the attention, Margaret used her platform to raise awareness about the dangers of unchecked surveillance. She wrote a best-selling book detailing her experiences, donating proceeds to organizations supporting victims of stalking and identity theft. Yet perhaps the most surprising development came years later, long after the headlines had faded. A documentary filmmaker uncovered footage from one of Hargrove's early experiments, a prototype phone left behind in a storage unit he'd rented under a fake name. When activated, the device delivered a final message, addressed not to any specific victim but to the world. "You think you've stopped me, but I've only shown you the beginning. Secrets will always find their way out." The cryptic warning reignited old fears, prompting speculation that others might have taken up Hargrove's mantle. Some believed he had collaborators still at large, while others argued the message was merely a posthumous taunt designed to haunt from beyond bars. Regardless of its origin, it served as a chilling reminder, in a world where technology could expose even the darkest corners of our lives, no secret was truly safe. Los Angeles moved forward, scarred but stronger. Streets once haunted by the phantom rings of rotary phones slowly returned to normalcy, though some residents admitted they still flinched at the sound of an unexpected call. And while Hargrove remained behind bars, his shadow lingered, a testament to the power of secrets and the lengths some would go to unearth them. In the end, the city emerged changed, not broken, but wiser. It learned that fear could either paralyze or propel, and chose the latter. For every life disrupted by the phantom phones, another was rebuilt with newfound purpose. And though the echoes of those haunting messages would never fully fade, they became a part of the city's story, a chapter written in static and silence, reminding everyone that sometimes, the greatest mysteries lie not in the unknown, but in ourselves. The fluorescent buzz of the overhead lights mingled with the sizzle of the deep fryers at Burger Haven on an otherwise ordinary Friday afternoon. The restaurant, a popular fast food chain known for its consistently cheery service and mouth-watering burgers, was a hive of activity as families, students, and office workers rushed in for a quick bite. Behind the counter, employees moved with practiced precision, their smiles as routine as the clatter of orders being relayed from the bustling kitchen. Yet beneath the veneer of normalcy, an undercurrent of tension pulsed quietly, a tension that no one present could have foreseen would soon shatter the calm of this everyday establishment. Anthony Rivera, the assistant manager of this particular Burger Haven outlet, had always been regarded as the backbone of the restaurant's smooth operation. Meticulous in his duties and known for his unwavering integrity, he had been with the chain for nearly a decade. Yet in recent months, his demeanor had grown pensive, his eyes shadowed with worry. Rumors among the staff whispered of discrepancies in the daily cash reports and unusual inventory shortages that he alone seemed determined to investigate. Late on that fateful Friday, as the lunch rush subsided and the hum of conversation gave way to a quieter, more measured rhythm, Anthony retired to the storeroom to review the evening's numbers. It was there, amid the neatly stacked boxes of frozen patties and crisp lettuce, that a discovery would set in motion a chain of events no one could have anticipated. A piercing shriek from the back office jolted the night shift crew into attention. Jasmine Cole, a cook known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp wit, had stumbled upon a scene that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Rounding a corner in the storeroom, her eyes fell upon Anthony lying crumpled on the cold, tiled floor. His normally immaculate uniform was soaked in blood, his face frozen in an expression of shock and betrayal. A heavy metal cleaver, a tool usually reserved for slicing through thick cuts of meat in the kitchen, lay discarded a few feet away. A hastily scrawled note, pinned to a crate with a stray paperclip, bore a single chilling message: "The secret costs more than you can count." The ensuing chaos was instantaneous. Jasmine's scream echoed off the walls as she dialed 911, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Within minutes, the restaurant was swarming with uniformed officers and forensic technicians, their presence transforming the familiar fast food haven into a crime scene under harsh, unyielding lights. Detective Simone Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for relentless determination, arrived on the scene with quiet authority. She surveyed the disarray, the pools of blood that had begun to congeal on the tiled floor, the splatter patterns near the frozen food section, and the unsettling stillness in the air that seemed to pulse with secrets. As she knelt beside Anthony's motionless body, a profound sense of loss mingled with the cold resolve that had carried her through countless investigations. In the hours that followed, the restaurant was cordoned off and every corner meticulously examined. Detective Hayes noted the absence of signs indicating a struggle. There were no overturned crates or scattered supplies in the immediate vicinity. It was as if Anthony had been ambushed in a place he had considered secure, a sanctuary built on years of routine and trust. Her gut told her that this was no random act of violence, but rather the calculated execution of someone who had stumbled too close to dangerous truths. With careful deliberation, she collected the note, the cleaver, and other pieces of evidence that might unravel the enigma of the murder. Among the items that caught her attention was a crumpled receipt for a large cash deposit, its date and time corresponding with the last shift change, and a set of fingerprints that did not belong to any known staff member. As word of the tragedy spread, the staff of Burger Haven huddled together in stunned silence. Many recalled moments earlier, When Anthony had confided his growing concerns about financial irregularities in hushed tones, his worry barely concealed behind a veneer of professional calm. One employee, Marcus Lee, a young cashier with wide, questioning eyes, mentioned that he had overheard a heated conversation between Anthony and an unidentified man in a dark jacket near closing time. Though his memory was blurred by shock, Marcus's account added a further layer of intrigue to an already baffling scene. Detective Hayes began the painstaking process of reconstructing the timeline of that last shift. Surveillance cameras installed discreetly throughout the restaurant provided grainy footage of the back office and storeroom corridors. In one frame, a figure wearing a hooded jacket could be seen lingering near the door of the storeroom, their face obscured by shadow. In another, a glimpse of a dark sedan idled outside the drive-through window, an anomaly that would soon demand closer scrutiny. Each frame, though fragmented and imperfect, offered small clues, as if the killer had taken care to erase all but the most stubborn traces of their presence. Interviews with staff members painted a picture of a man who had grown increasingly troubled by irregularities he had uncovered. Anthony, it seemed, had discovered that large sums of money were disappearing from the restaurant's daily takings, money that did not match up with the inventory records. Late at night, after closing, he had secretly combed through the financial ledgers and had found a series of unaccounted-for transfers, routed through anonymous bank accounts and linked to a shadowy network that extended far beyond the modest confines of a Burger Haven franchise. Determined to expose the fraud, Anthony had begun compiling a personal ledger of his findings, a digital file stored on a portable drive that now lay missing. Some believed he might have intended to bring his discoveries to the attention of corporate headquarters, or even law enforcement, unaware that his quest for truth would soon become the target of a murderous conspiracy. As Detective Hayes dug deeper, she discovered that the irregularities in the financial records were not isolated to this outlet alone. Rumors of discrepancies and missing funds had surfaced at several Burger Haven locations in the region, suggesting that a broader, more sinister scheme was at work. The chain's corporate structure, once hailed for its efficiency and integrity, was now under suspicion. A discreet inquiry into the financial operations revealed that a senior regional manager, Richard Powell, had been signing off on unusually large transfers from the local registers to an offshore account. Powell, known for his affable demeanor and polished public image, suddenly became a person of interest. Yet as Hayes prepared to interrogate Powell, another unexpected twist emerged. In a quiet, dimly lit interview room at the precinct, a nervous accountant from the chain's central office, Lorraine Banks, offered a confession that deepened the mystery. Between trembling words and long pauses, she revealed that she had been coerced into altering financial records for several outlets, including the one where Anthony had met his end. Lorraine explained that a group of unidentified figures had approached her with a lucrative proposition to adjust the numbers in exchange for a substantial payout. Fearing for her safety and entangled in a web of blackmail, she had reluctantly complied. Yet now, with Anthony's murder thrust the irregularities into stark relief, Lorraine believed that someone within their midst had taken drastic measures to silence the man who had begun to unravel the operation. The convergence of these testimonies pointed to a carefully orchestrated cover-up. Anthony's meticulous notes, the missing digital file, and the coerced alterations in the financial ledgers all hinted at an internal conspiracy. As Hayes cross-referenced payroll records, bank statements, and internal memos, a pattern began to emerge, a pattern that implicated not only Richard Powell, but also several mid-level managers who had been responsible for overseeing multiple outlets. Even more disturbing were the anonymous emails circulating among employees in the weeks preceding the murder, warning that the cost of secrets is measured in blood. One such email, its sender's identity hidden behind layers of encryption, had warned Anthony to keep quiet and count your profits carefully. The language was cryptic and unsettling, as if it were written by someone who believed that loyalty was secondary to profit, and that any disruption to the carefully balanced system would be met with ruthless retribution. Detective Hayes theorized that Anthony had become a liability when he began compiling evidence of the financial fraud. In his quest to protect the integrity of the restaurant, and perhaps even the entire chain, he had unwittingly put himself in the crosshairs of a powerful cabal determined to silence him permanently. Late one rainy evening, as the city's neon lights blurred into watery streaks on rain-soaked pavement, Hayes revisited Burger Haven to re-examine the scene. With the restaurant temporarily closed for investigation, the echo of dripping water and the hum of emergency lights lent an eerie atmosphere to the deserted dining area. In a narrow corridor, leading to the storeroom, she discovered a small scrap of paper wedged between two crates, a fragment of Anthony's personal ledger that had somehow escaped notice during the initial sweep. The paper contained a series of numbers, dates, and a single phrase scrawled in hastily written ink: "Follow the trail. Trust no one." The cryptic message seemed to be Anthony's final warning, a desperate plea for someone to continue his work even as he paid the ultimate price. Emboldened by this new clue, Hayes expanded her investigation into the digital realm. For days, she worked with a team of cyber forensics experts to decrypt files recovered from the restaurant's computer systems. Amid the jumble of administrative emails and mundane scheduling software, they uncovered a hidden folder labeled Integrity. Within it lay documents detailing irregular transactions, unauthorized transfers, and internal memos that made direct reference to the missing funds. One file in particular caught her attention, a scanned copy of an internal report from 2 weeks prior, signed by none other than Richard Powell himself. The report contained alarming discrepancies that pointed to deliberate manipulation of the cash registers and a deliberate concealment of profits. The evidence was damning, but it also raised a host of questions. Had Powell acted alone, or was he merely the front for a more extensive criminal network? The investigation soon took an even darker turn when Hayes received an anonymous phone call in the dead of night. The caller's voice was distorted and breathless, warning her that she was digging too deep and that some secrets are buried for a reason. The message, though vague, sent a chill down her spine. Hayes knew that every step closer to the truth increased the danger not only for her but also for those who might be caught in the crossfire. With a steely resolve, she pressed on, determined to bring justice for Anthony Rivera, even if it meant confronting the powerful figures who had built their fortunes on deception. As the days turned into weeks, a web of corruption began to unravel before Hayes's eyes. Investigations into other Burger Haven outlets revealed similar patterns of financial irregularities. Interviews with branch managers, cashiers, and even maintenance staff yielded fragments of information that hinted at a larger conspiracy. A maintenance supervisor recalled being approached by a man in a dark suit who offered him a substantial sum to ignore discrepancies in the store's inventory counts. A cashier, tears glistening in his eyes during an anonymous interview, admitted that he had witnessed unexplained cash drops from the register into a hidden envelope on more than one occasion. Each revelation, while seemingly isolated, coalesced into a disturbing mosaic of greed and collusion. Pressure began to mount on Richard Powell as internal auditors from the corporate headquarters initiated their own review of the regional accounts. Yet even as Powell's public image crumbled under the weight of mounting allegations, Hayes sensed that a far more dangerous force was at play. In a dramatic twist that rocked the investigation, surveillance footage from a nearby intersection revealed a dark sedan parked outside Burger Haven on the night of Anthony's murder. The vehicle, its windows heavily tinted and its license plate obscured, had been seen repeatedly in the vicinity in the days leading up to the incident. Forensic analysis of paint chips recovered from the storeroom's floor yielded a partial match with the sedan's exterior, linking it to a local enforcer known to work for organized crime. Rumors in the underbelly of the city spoke of Vincent "Vinny" Delgado, a notorious mob lieutenant whose influence extended into local businesses and even some sectors of the corporate world. Delgado was known for his ruthless efficiency in taking care of problems, and Hayes began to suspect that his name was being whispered in connection with the murder. As the investigation deepened, Hayes found herself caught in a labyrinth of conflicting loyalties and hidden agendas. On one hand, the evidence pointed increasingly toward an internal conspiracy within Burger Haven's management, implicating Powell and several of his close associates. On the other hand, the involvement of an external enforcer like Delgado suggested that the corruption might have been part of a broader, more menacing criminal enterprise, one that extended far beyond the walls of a single fast food restaurant. Late one night, while reviewing a series of encrypted emails with her cyber team, Hayes uncovered a disturbing communication. The email, sent from an untraceable address, detailed plans for securing the operation and included explicit instructions to eliminate the threat permanently. The tone was chillingly clinical, as if the writer were issuing orders rather than expressing personal animosity. The timing of the email corresponded with the days immediately following Anthony's discovery, leaving no doubt that his murder had been premeditated and executed with cold precision. Haunted by the enormity of what she had uncovered, Detective Simone Hayes began to piece together the final components of the puzzle. She organized a clandestine meeting with one of the restaurant's former managers, an individual who had resigned abruptly after being implicated in the financial discrepancies. In a nondescript cafe on the outskirts of the city, the former manager, whose voice trembled with regret and fear, confessed that he had seen Powell in a heated argument with an unidentified man in a dark suit on the night before Anthony's death. The man, he recalled, had a scar running down his left cheek and spoke in a measured, almost rehearsed tone. Although his memory of the incident was hazy, the details resonated with the profile of someone connected to Delgado's crew. The former manager's account lent further credence to Hayes's theory that the murder was not merely about internal embezzlement but also about protecting a far more insidious network of criminal activity. In a final twist that seemed almost too cinematic to be real, Hayes received a tip-off from an unexpected source, a local journalist who had been investigating corruption within regional franchises. The journalist, known for her dogged persistence and fearless pursuit of the truth, handed Hayes a flash drive containing a series of video recordings. The footage, recorded from a hidden camera placed in a back alley near Burger Haven, showed a covert meeting between Richard Powell and a man later identified as an associate of Delgado. In the dim light of a flickering street lamp, Powell could be seen handing over a manila envelope stuffed with cash, his eyes darting nervously as if he feared unseen eyes. The associate's cold, unflinching gaze made it clear that this was a transaction born out of desperation and the need to cover up a scandal that could topple an entire network. The recording, though grainy, was damning evidence that connected the dots between internal fraud and external criminal influence. Armed with this new evidence, Hayes orchestrated a daring sting operation. Under cover of darkness, and with the cooperation of federal agents, she arranged for a covert surveillance team to shadow Richard Powell and his associates as they gathered for what they believed was a routine meeting at a secluded warehouse on the city's industrial outskirts. The tension in the cramped, dimly lit space was palpable as Powell and a handful of his lieutenants discussed the necessary adjustments to keep their scheme afloat. Unbeknownst to them, every word was being recorded and every gesture observed. In a dramatic turn of events, as the meeting reached its climax, federal agents burst into the room, arresting Powell and several others on charges ranging from fraud and embezzlement to conspiracy and, most shockingly, complicity in murder. In the interrogation room that followed, a visibly shaken Powell maintained his composure even as the evidence against him mounted. Under relentless questioning, and with the weight of the flash drive recordings and forensic evidence bearing down on him, he finally broke. In a measured, defeated tone, Powell admitted that he had been aware of Anthony Rivera's suspicions for weeks and that he had taken every measure to ensure the financial discrepancies remained hidden. He was going to ruin everything, he muttered, his eyes hollow with remorse and fear. I tried to warn him, he shouldn't have been so nosy. His confession, while not an outright admission of ordering the murder, implicated him in a broader conspiracy that left little room for doubt. The anonymous voice on the earlier email, the presence of Delgado's enforcer, and the corroborative testimony of former managers all converged to form an unassailable case. Even as the arrest sent shockwaves through the corporate world and local organized crime circles alike, the fallout from Anthony Rivera's murder rippled far beyond the confines of that single Burger Haven outlet. Investigations revealed that the fraudulent practices had been ongoing for years, a systemic rot at the heart of the regional franchise network. Several other outlets were placed under audit, and corporate headquarters launched a sweeping internal review that threatened to upend the entire chain's operations. Meanwhile, Detective Simone Hayes, though hailed by many as a hero for her relentless pursuit of the truth, found little solace in the accolades. The case had exposed not only the corruption within a beloved fast food institution, but also the dark nexus between corporate greed and organized crime, a nexus that seemed to stretch its tendrils into every facet of modern life. In the months that followed, as the courts processed the cascade of indictments and the media circled around the scandal like vultures, the community grappled with a profound sense of betrayal. Regular patrons of Burger Haven, who had once taken comfort in the familiarity of their local outlet, now eyed the establishment with a wary skepticism. The stark reality was that even in places where life seemed routine and predictable, danger could lurk in the most unassuming corners. For those who had known Anthony Rivera, a man whose dedication to honesty had cost him his life, the tragedy became a somber reminder that truth, no matter how carefully hidden, eventually finds a way to surface. Detective Hayes continued her work with a quiet determination, her every move now imbued with the knowledge that corruption could infect even the simplest institutions. In the stillness of her modest office, surrounded by meticulously organized case files and the lingering scent of stale coffee, she often replayed the moments of that fateful Friday. The memory of Anthony's final look, the cryptic note that spoke of secrets and sacrifices, and the haunting image of a dark sedan parked outside the restaurant all coalesced into a relentless drive for justice. Each new lead, every small breakthrough in the labyrinth of financial records and covert communications, was a testament to her belief that the pursuit of truth was a duty that transcended fear. Yet even as the legal battles unfolded and the convicted conspirators awaited sentencing, Hayes knew that the case was far from closed. The enigmatic figure known only as R, whose voice had warned her over the phone, remained at large, a shadowy presence who might have orchestrated the murder from behind layers of digital anonymity. Despite the monumental progress made in uncovering the network of corruption, that lingering question, the identity and ultimate motive of R, continued to haunt her. In quiet moments between interrogations and late-night case reviews, Hayes would pore over every scrap of evidence, determined to find the missing link that might finally expose the full extent of the conspiracy. The story of Anthony Rivera's murder soon became a legend in local law enforcement circles, a chilling reminder that even the most mundane settings could conceal secrets capable of upending lives and institutions. For the patrons of Burger Haven, the once familiar jingles and cheerful faces had become tainted by the specter of betrayal, a symbol of how trust could be so devastatingly exploited. And for Detective Simone Hayes, the case remained an enduring testament to the high price of integrity in a world where greed and power often conspired to silence those who dared to ask questions. In the end, as the autumn leaves began to fall and the city slowly resumed its frenetic pace, the legacy of that fateful Friday lingered like a dark stain on the collective conscience. The courtroom dramas, the tearful testimonies, and the cold confessions had all converged into a sobering narrative of sacrifice and consequence. The convicted executives and their criminal cohorts would serve long prison sentences, and corporate reforms were implemented in the wake of the scandal. But for those who had lost loved ones, and for the tireless investigator who had given everything to uncover the truth, the scars remained indelible. Even now, on quiet evenings when the neon sign of Burger Haven flickers in the distance and the hum of the fryer echoes like a distant memory, one cannot help but recall the day when ordinary life was shattered by an act of calculated malice. The whispers among the employees, the tear-stained ledger pages, and the relentless pursuit of justice by Detective Hayes all serve as enduring reminders that even in the most unremarkable places, secrets have a way of emerging into the harsh light of day, and that the price of silence is often paid in blood. And so, as the city moved forward and new headlines vied for attention, the story of Anthony Rivera's murder remained etched in the annals of true crime, a stark, unyielding chronicle of betrayal, greed, and the unwavering quest for truth. In every shadowed corner of Burger Haven, in every cautious glance exchanged between employees, there lived a quiet promise that such darkness would not be allowed to fester unchallenged. For Detective Simone Hayes, each day was a reminder that justice, however delayed, must always prevail, and that the relentless pursuit of truth, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, was the only path to redeeming a broken system. As the final echoes of that grim chapter slowly faded into memory, the lessons of that day endured. They served as a timeless testament to the resilience of those who dared to question the status quo and the heavy cost borne by those who chose integrity over complicity. And in the silent resolve of every investigator who took up the mantle of truth, the legacy of Anthony Rivera's life and his tragic, untimely death would forever inspire a determined stand against the pervasive darkness of corruption. The Helix Museum of Antiquities had always been a place where history whispered from every corner, but on that chill November evening, the museum's silent halls held a secret that would unravel lives and legacies. Under the vaulted ceilings and amidst ancient relics, painstakingly preserved in glass cases, a private after-hours event was underway. An exclusive gathering of art collectors and influential patrons, all eager to glimpse a newly acquired collection of rare artifacts. The atmosphere was one of refined elegance, a carefully curated celebration of the past. Yet, beneath the genteel smiles and polite conversation, tension simmered like a dormant volcano waiting for a spark. Among the distinguished guests was Dr. Marcus Ellison, the museum's esteemed curator, whose reputation for dedication and scholarly rigor had earned him both admiration and quiet envy. In the days leading up to the event, he had been unusually preoccupied, his once steady gaze now haunted by furtive glances at confidential documents and secretive phone calls that he managed in hushed tones. Many of his colleagues noted that he seemed to be on the verge of a breakthrough, one that might expose irregularities in the provenance of several priceless artifacts. His private study, hidden behind the public galleries and accessible only to senior staff, had become a sanctuary for his meticulous notes and research. Tonight, however, that sanctum of knowledge would become the scene of unspeakable violence. As the evening advanced and the museum's grand atrium filled with the soft strains of a string quartet, a piercing scream shattered the air. The sound cut through the elegant hum of conversation like a shard of glass. Guests exchanged startled glances, and within minutes the murmuring crowd began to coalesce into anxious clusters near the restricted access door leading to the curator's private study. There, on a richly woven oriental rug and under the harsh glare of emergency lights, lay the body of Dr. Ellison. His once composed features were frozen in a final expression of shock, and a dark stain spread slowly across the marble floor, a silent testament to the brutality of the act. Clutched in his hand was a crumpled slip of paper with cryptic markings, as if he had attempted a final message before his life ebbed away. Detective Clara Ramirez arrived on the scene shortly after the call. Known for her cool composure and an unerring instinct for hidden details, she moved purposefully through the chaos. The museum, with its centuries-old artifacts and labyrinthine corridors, was transformed into a stage for a modern tragedy. As she surveyed the study, Ramirez noted the subtle disarray, a toppled stack of old ledgers, scattered personal papers, and a broken antique vase, whose shards lay shimmering in a pool of spilled blood. Each detail, no matter how minute, spoke to a meticulous design rather than a random act of violence. Ramirez's first interviews with the staff painted a picture of an institution caught between the demands of public expectation and the weight of buried secrets. Amelia Vaughn, the museum's director, appeared visibly shaken yet determined to maintain order. In hushed, trembling tones, she recalled that earlier in the day, Dr. Ellison had confided in her about finding anomalies in the documentation of several artifacts, suggestions that some objects might have been acquired through illicit channels. He was worried, she admitted. He thought that exposing the truth would not only tarnish our reputation, but might also endanger his own safety. Her eyes, though red-rimmed from grief, betrayed a complexity of emotions: remorse, fear, and a hint of resignation. In the days that followed, Detective Ramirez immersed herself in the case, methodically retracing Dr. Ellison's final hours. Security footage from the museum's polished corridors revealed a solitary figure in a dark, tailored suit, a person whose face was obscured by a low hat and the shadows cast by the ornate lighting. The figure had lingered near the curator's study, just minutes before the fatal scream, moving with a deliberate, almost ritualistic precision. Ramirez's instincts screamed that this individual was no mere interloper but an actor in a premeditated plan. She pored over the recordings repeatedly, each frame of the mysterious visitor igniting more questions than answers. As the investigation progressed, clues began to emerge that pointed toward an intricate web of deceit that reached far beyond the walls of the museum. Among the recovered documents from Dr. Ellison's study was a series of annotated catalogs and correspondence with various experts in the field of antiquities. One dossier, in particular, detailed irregularities in the provenance of a set of ancient coins purportedly from a long-lost civilization. The annotations, written in Dr. Ellison's meticulous hand, suggested that these coins might have been part of a broader network of forged artifacts circulating among elite collectors. The slip of paper clutched in his lifeless hand bore a cryptic inscription, a sequence of numbers and letters that, after hours of cryptographic analysis by Ramirez's team, appeared to be a code. The code, when cross-referenced with internal museum memos, pointed to a discrete file labeled Project Aegis. In parallel, Ramirez delved into the financial records of the museum, discovering a series of unexplained transactions that hinted at a shadow operation running beneath the surface of the institution's pristine exterior. Large sums of money had been funneled into an account associated with an obscure art dealer from Eastern Europe, a name that kept surfacing in hushed conversations and anonymous tips. The dealer, whose identity was shrouded in mystery, was rumored to have ties to an international network involved in the smuggling and falsification of ancient artifacts. With every new piece of evidence, the case grew in complexity and scope, intertwining the worlds of high art, academic scholarship, and organized crime. As Detective Ramirez pieced together the fragmented evidence, she discovered that the museum's board of trustees had been under immense pressure to maintain the institution's illustrious reputation at any cost. Rumors swirled of clandestine meetings held in the back rooms of opulent mansions, where decisions were made to suppress inconvenient truths about the museum's acquisitions. One trustee, whose identity was carefully concealed from the press, was rumored to have a personal connection with the enigmatic art dealer. Ellison's discoveries might have threatened not only the financial stability of the museum, but also the personal fortunes and reputations of those in power. Late one rainy evening, Ramirez returned to the museum to re-examine the curator's study, a room now cordoned off by yellow police tape and illuminated by the sterile glow of forensic lights. In the quiet solitude, she noticed a detail that had previously escaped her notice, a faint outline of a fingerprint on the glass display case that housed a priceless statuette. The print was smudged, as if someone had deliberately tried to obscure their identity in a moment of panic. With this revelation, Ramirez ordered a forensic analysis that would ultimately tie the fingerprint to a known individual, a local businessman with a shadowy reputation for art dealing and money laundering. The businessman, Victor Marlowe, had long been whispered about in the circles of high finance and illicit art trades. His suave demeanor and philanthropic public persona masked a ruthless ambition and a willingness to employ violence when cornered. As Ramirez connected the threads between the financial irregularities, the mysterious coded message, and the presence of Victor Marlowe, she began to suspect that the murder of Dr. Ellison was not an isolated incident, but the spark of a much larger conspiracy. Interviews with museum employees, former donors, and even rival art historians revealed that Dr. Ellison had been vocal about the need for transparency in the museum's acquisitions. His research had uncovered evidence that many of the artifacts, including the disputed coins and statuette, might have been obtained through fraudulent means, exchanged for illicit funds, smuggled across borders, and laundered through high society. It became increasingly clear that Ellison's death was a calculated act intended to silence his revelations before they could shatter the carefully constructed edifice of respectability built by the museum and its influential patrons. In one particularly unsettling interview, a former research assistant confessed that Dr. Ellison had confided in her his growing unease about anonymous threats. He said someone had broken into his office and left a message scrawled on the mirror, the assistant recalled, her voice barely above a whisper. It read, "Truth is the enemy of power." He was terrified but determined to continue. The assistant's trembling recollection resonated with the cryptic note found in his hand, a final desperate attempt to warn the world about the hidden forces that had silenced him. As the investigation reached a fever pitch, Ramirez orchestrated a covert surveillance operation targeting Victor Marlowe. Under the cover of darkness, a team of plainclothes officers shadowed his movements. They observed him meeting discreetly with a shadowy figure in an upscale hotel lobby, a meeting that lasted only a few minutes but was charged with an air of ominous finality. Surveillance footage captured their brief exchange, during which Marlowe slipped an envelope into the stranger's hand. Although the contents of the envelope remained unknown, forensic examination later revealed traces of a rare compound used in the restoration of antiquities, a compound that was not typically found outside the controlled environment of a museum's conservation lab. The mounting evidence led Ramirez to a long overlooked lid, a series of internal emails exchanged between Amelia Vaughn, the museum director, and a senior trustee known only as Mr. K. In these emails, the tone was unusually terse, and the language hinted at desperation. "We must protect our legacy at all costs," one email read, "even if it means making sacrifices." The implication was clear. The museum's leadership had been aware of the dubious origins of some acquisitions and had made a deliberate decision to suppress the truth. The final piece of the puzzle came when Ramirez uncovered a digital backup of Project Aegis files hidden on a secure server within the museum's administrative wing. These files contained detailed records of bribes, forged documents, and internal communications that unequivocally tied several high-ranking officials to the art smuggling operation. In a dramatic culmination of months of investigation, Detective Ramirez confronted Amelia Vaughn in the quiet solitude of the museum's director's office. The room, once a symbol of intellectual grandeur with its rows of ancient texts and carefully framed portraits, now served as the setting for an interrogation that would expose decades of deceit. Vaughn's face, etched with lines of regret and defiance, wavered between fury and sorrow as Ramirez laid out the evidence. Dr. Ellison wasn't just a curator, Ramirez said steadily. He was the only one brave enough to challenge the system. And now his silence speaks louder than any of your assurances. Vaughn's eyes flickered with a mixture of resignation and bitterness as she confessed that the museum's board had sanctioned the cover-up long ago. The scandal, she admitted, was tied to lucrative deals with Victor Marlowe and a network of international brokers who had ensured that every artifact in the collection was, in essence, a counterfeit, an elaborate illusion designed to maintain the museum's prestige and financial inflows. As Vaughn's confession unfolded, the layers of the conspiracy peeled back to reveal the staggering scale of corruption. The meticulously crafted facade of the Helix Museum was built on a foundation of stolen heritage and deceit. Every meticulously arranged display, every artifact celebrated as a window into a lost civilization, was now tainted by the knowledge that they had been acquired through a series of illicit transactions and elaborate forgeries. Dr. Ellison's relentless pursuit of truth had threatened to expose not only his own colleagues, but also powerful figures in international art markets, financial institutions, and even government agencies complicit in turning a blind eye to cultural plunder. In the ensuing weeks, as the scandal broke into the public domain, the art world was rocked to its core. Protests erupted outside the museum, and headlines blared with accusations of cultural theft and institutional betrayal. The trial that followed became one of the most high-profile cases in recent history, with testimonies from disgruntled former employees, forensic experts, and even international art curators who had unwittingly purchased items of dubious origin. Detective Ramirez, whose tireless work had unearthed the intricate layers of deceit, was lauded for her courage and tenacity. Yet in the quiet hours of the night, when the adrenaline faded and the echoes of the past returned, she could not escape the haunting memory of Dr. Ellison's final moments, the desperate look in his eyes as he clutched his final warning, and the silent scream that had gone unheard in the echoing corridors of the museum. Even as convictions were handed down and reforms were promised, the scars of that night remained. The Helix Museum of Antiquities, once a proud repository of human history, now stood as a stark monument to the consequences of unchecked ambition and moral compromise. The stolen treasures, displayed behind reinforced glass, continued to draw crowds, but beneath their polished surfaces lay a darker narrative, one of betrayal, greed, and the high cost of silence. For every artifact celebrated for its beauty and historical significance, there was a story of loss and deceit, a story that Detective Ramirez knew would haunt her for years to come. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, as the museum underwent sweeping changes and new leadership took charge, Ramirez continued to pursue the loose end that still gnawed at her, a lingering mystery about the identity of Mr. in the full extent of the international network behind the smuggling ring. Late one night, while sifting through additional digital archives recovered from the museum's secure server, she uncovered an encrypted folder labeled Requiem. Within its depths were correspondences, bank records, and photographs that hinted at further layers of complicity among figures whose names had never appeared in public records. The documents suggested that the scandal was merely the tip of an iceberg that extended across continents, implicating not only art dealers and museum officials, but also high-ranking government advisors and cultural ministers. The revelation was a sobering reminder that the quest for truth was an unending struggle, a battle fought in the shadows of power, where every uncovered secret led to another deeper mystery. Detective Ramirez, now both celebrated and burdened by her discoveries, resolved to continue her pursuit of justice, even as she faced threats from unknown sources and the relentless pressure of a system that preferred silence over accountability. In a final act of defiance, she arranged for the encrypted Requiem files to be leaked to a trusted international news organization. The exposé that followed shook the foundations of the global art world and ignited calls for comprehensive investigations into cultural heritage crimes. Yet even as the world took notice and demanded reform, Ramirez knew that the true cost of the museum's dark legacy would be measured not only in legal settlements or institutional overhauls, but in the irreversible loss of trust, integrity, and the very soul of history itself. Standing before the once hallowed galleries of the Helix Museum in the early morning light, Detective Clara Ramirez paused to reflect on the tumultuous journey that had begun with a single fateful scream. The echoes of Dr. Ellison's final cry reverberated in her memory, a stark reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would eventually claw its way to the surface. The museum's silent corridors, now filled with the murmur of renewed vigilance and hard-won accountability, bore witness to both the beauty of human history and the enduring cost of its corruption. As the city moved forward and new chapters of art and culture were written, the legacy of that grim night remained an indelible scar on the collective conscience, a testament to the price of greed and the unwavering power of those who dare to challenge it. And though many of the key players in the conspiracy would fade into obscurity behind legal barriers and political maneuvering, the truth that Detective Ramirez had uncovered would continue to shine as a beacon for future generations, a reminder that even in the shadow of artifice, the light of integrity and justice is a force that can never be extinguished. In the end, the Helix Museum of Antiquities became more than just a repository of relics. It was transformed into a living monument to the relentless pursuit of truth. Every visitor who now walked its corridors, every scholar who studied its exhibits, carried with them the silent, bittersweet knowledge that history is not only measured in the beauty of its treasures, but also in the courage of those who risk everything to protect it. And as Detective Ramirez walked away from the museum that morning, her heart heavy yet resolute, she knew that the battle against corruption and betrayal was far from over, even as she allowed herself a brief moment of solace in the knowledge that somewhere in the hidden depths of the past, Dr. Ellison's voice would forever echo, a call to remember, to question, and ultimately, to seek the truth.